Imagine a hero, not just any hero, but one famous for these impossible feats of strength, right? A champion.
Right. The kind of figure you see on statues.
Exactly. Now picture that same hero facing a task so utterly grotesque, so beyond the pale, that it tests not just his legendary muscles, but his very soul, his willingness to descend into pure barbarity.
That's really what we're exploring today, isn't it?
It is. It's a chilling contrast to that noble, often idealized image we have of heroes.
And this deep dive takes us to a truly dark, unsettling chapter for one of antiquity's most famous figures.
Absolutely. Our central figure is Hercules. That's the Roman name for the Greek divine hero Heracles.
Yeah, everyone knows Hercules.
Yeah.
Immense strength, loads of adventures.
Yeah, but what makes him so enduring, I think, is how multifaceted he is. He's full of contradictions, which allows for so many, takes on him throughout history.
And today, we're taking a deep dive into one of his most shocking and, frankly, most gruesome labors.
The harrowing confrontation with the man-eating mares of Diomedes?
Yeah. Exactly. It's a story that reveals a very, very different side of heroism.
So today we're really digging into the chilling origins of these ravenous beasts, the monstrous cruelty of their master, King Diomedes.
And Hercules' method for dealing with them, which is brutal, eye for an eye stuff.
Brutal is the word. And what that whole messy victory tells us about the very nature of heroism itself. It's a shortcut, really, to understanding a lesser-known but intensely impactful part of his legend.
What's remarkable about Hercules, really, is that his personal problems, in a sense, they began right at birth.
Straight out of the gate.
Pretty much. He was the son of Jupiter, the Roman king of the gods and the mortal Alcmena, and right away he was cursed by the immediate wrath of Juno, Jupiter's notoriously jealous wife.
She didn't waste any time, tried to stop his birth with witches, apparently.
Yeah, that's the story, and when that failed...
So even as an infant, he's already facing divine wrath. It's terrifying. And then the snakes, Juno sends serpents to his cradle.
They just, he strangles them, both of them, as a baby.
That image is just astonishing. An infant with that kind of strength. What does that signify for his later life? It's almost shocking.
Well, it immediately sets the stage, doesn't it? Extraordinary power, yes, but also immense struggle right from the start.
And there's that other story, too, about the Milky Way. It seems almost whimsical compared to snake strangling.
Right. It links directly to this early period of divine antagonism. Alcmena, terrified of Juno, actually abandoned baby Hercules in the woods to protect him, you see.
That's rough.
But Minerva found him. And in this, clever ruse, she brought him to Juno, pretending he was just an orphan needing nourishment.
No way. So Juno,
completely unaware it's her husband's illegitimate child,
unknowingly suckled Hercules at her own breast until he bit her nipple.
Ouch. Yes. She pushed him away, her milk spills across the night sky, and boom, the Milky Way.
And the irony is that act, her own milk, despite her hatred for him, it inadvertently gave Hercules even more strength.
Exactly. It's almost like fate, destiny, whatever you want to call it. He was destined for greatness, even if the gods themselves tried to stop him. It shows how tangled his fate was with the Olympians, even the ones who hated him.
So if we zoom out a bit, the Romans really took to him, didn't they?
Oh, absolutely. They didn't just translate his Greek name, Heracles. They adopted Hercules through their Etruscan neighbors.
So Heracles.
Right, different spellings, showing how early his influence spread across the Italian peninsula. He really became their own.
And so ingrained that people would just say Hercule or miracle in everyday chat, like saying good heavens or something.
Pretty much. It shows how deeply he permeated Roman culture, not just in the big myths, but in daily life. And he had his own distinctly Roman stories, too.
Like beating Caucasus, the fire-breathing monster near Rome.
That's the one, terrorizing the countryside. Hercules sorts him out. He was strongly associated with the Aventine Hill through his son Aventinus.
And powerful figures actually saw him as a personal patron god, like Mark Antony, Emperor Commodus.
Yes. Which raises a question, right? Given his often tragic backstory and, let's be honest, his volatile nature, what was it about him that truly resonated with the Romans? Why him?
Good question. Maybe it was that journey from adversity to triumph, despite all the divine interference, and his versatility.
How so?
Well, his religious worship included being a deity concerned with children and childbirth, maybe because of his own crazy infancy.
And his numerous offspring, yeah.
Right. And Roman brides wore that special belt, the Knot of Hercules, supposed to be hard to untie, symbolizing a strong marriage.
It's that blend of raw power And, surprisingly, domestic connection. He even shows up in Roman literature in very different ways.
Yeah, from Plautus's Amphitryon, which is basically a sex comedy about his conception,
Hilarious.
to Seneca's tragedy, Hercules Furens, which gets deep into his madness. He contained multitudes.
And his reach went beyond Rome. Tacitus, the Roman historian, he wrote about how the Germanic peoples had a special affinity for Hercules.
Really? How so?
They'd sing about him first among heroes before going into battle. He was called the Bardatus. Wow. And there's this theory that Tacitus might have been kind of mapping Hercules onto their own god, Hunra's, Thor, seeing parallels in strength and heroism.
That makes sense, the strongman archetype. And you see that visually too, right? With those Hercules club amulets.
Exactly. Little wooden clubs, popular in the Roman era. The theory is they spread from Germanic areas across Europe during the migration period.
Like Donar's clubs. Donar being another name for Thor.
Precisely. And those were eventually replaced by Thor's hammer pendants, like a Mjolnir, as Christianity spread. So you see this clear line. Hercules' club evolves into Thor's hammer, a continuous cultural thread of the mighty hero.
Okay, so we've established Hercules as this complex, oft-troubled hero forged in adversity. Now let's really dive into that specific nightmare King Eurystheus cooked up for him. The eighth labor.
Our journey to Thrace.
Exactly. We're heading to the supposedly barbaric land of Thrace, wild, lawless region ruled by this tyrannical King Diomedes.
And Diomedes was the son of Ares, the god of war, Mars, in Roman terms.
So you can imagine he inherited some of that cruelty and brutality from death.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
But what really defined Diomedes' barbarity and this whole labor were his stables.
Yes, the infamous stables. He owned 4 horses, right? Magnificent animals, apparently, but wild, uncontrollable.
Podargos the swift,
Lampon.
Shining, Xanthos the yellow, and Danos the terrible. Great names.
Terrifying names, too. But these weren't just ordinary horses, were they?
Not even close. This is where it gets really dark. They were carnivorous.
Man-eating horses. That's genuinely chilling. How did that even happen?
Their diet was horrific. Human flesh. Diomedes would capture unsuspecting strangers, travelers, maybe his enemies.
And just feed them to the horses.
Tie them to bronze mangers with iron chains, apparently. And let the mares devour them alive.
Ugh, imagine those stables. The smell, the remnants.
Caked with dried blood and bones, they say. A monument to horror. Their reputation was so bad that just traveling through Thrace was basically a death sentence.
It's not just a king being cruel. It's like a perversion of nature itself, using these beasts.
Absolutely. And you can just picture King Eurystheus, Hercules' scheming cousin and taskmaster.
Oh, you must have loved this one.
He likely delighted in its gruesome nature. It would test Hercules' strength, sure, but also his stomach, his nerve, his willingness to face pure barbarity.
And maybe Eurystheus secretly hoped Hercules would end up as horse food himself?
Probably. The command was direct, simple, and just.
Yeah.
Utterly chilling. Bring me the mares of Diomedes.
So Hercules makes the journey to Thrace. He gets to Diomedes' fortress, and he must have immediately grasped the unique horror of the situation.
Right. These weren't just wild animals. They were instruments of terror, driven by this perverse, maybe supernatural hunger.
He needed a way to control them, obviously, but first he had to deal with their master, Diomedes himself.
Accounts differ a bit on how that first encounter went down. Some say Hercules fought Diomedes' guards first.
Makes sense. Wouldn't just walk in.
Others say he just went straight for the king and overpowered him directly, Hercules being Hercules.
Either way, it all leads to the same shocking climax. Hercules drags the tyrant.
Drags Diomedes to his own stables.
And then he does the unthinkable. He throws Diomedes to his own starved, flesh-eating mares.
Wow. That's not just killing him. That's something else entirely.
It's this horrifying act of pure, visceral justice. Or revenge. Maybe both.
It's often called poetic justice, isn't it? Gruesome but fitting. In a dark way, the mares immediately turned on their master, devoured him alive.
Turning the oppressor's own cruelty right back on him.
And it highlights Hercules' willingness, maybe necessity, to use the very tools of terror against their creator. He meets barbarity with, well, barbarity.
And what's really striking is the effect this had on the mares themselves.
Right. After consuming their master, their monstrous hunger was either, temporarily satisfied?
Or maybe the sheer horror of it broke their spirits. Or something.
Could be. Whatever the reason, they became momentarily docile. Manageable, at least enough for Hercules to handle them.
It's a brutal method, feeding a guy to his pets to calm them down, but undeniably effective in the story.
It worked. So with the mares now subdued, Hercules leads them out of the stables of horror.
But the journey back to Mycenae wasn't straightforward either, was it? Accounts differ again.
Yeah, some say he brought them to a public square somewhere, maybe back in Tiryns or Mycenae, and their savagery just flared up again, terrifying everyone.
Oops. Didn't quite work long term.
Others claim he managed to get them all the way back to Eurystheus without any more trouble, their hunger apparently quenched by,
Yeah.
well,
So what does this labor, this whole gruesome episode, really tell us about Hercules? About heroism?
Well, it definitely stands out, doesn't it? Because of that brutal resolution. It forces Hercules to, as you said earlier, sort of descend to a level of barbarity to combat barbarity itself.
It shows a darker side, a pragmatic side. Maybe ruthless is the word.
Yeah, pragmatic or ruthless. Willing to use extreme means for extreme problems. It certainly blurs the lines of what we might consider conventional heroism. He wasn't just strong, he was willing to get his hands very dirty. Hashtag, tag, 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 5e. The mare's fate and Hercules' enduring mythos.
Okay, so Hercules gets back to Mycenae, somehow manages to present these man-eating horses to King Eurystheus.
And Eurystheus, unsurprisingly, is terrified, utterly freaked out. He wants nothing to do with them.
Can't really blame him there. Keep the flesh-eating horses, no thanks.
Absolutely not. They're like living proof of Diomedes' depravity, so he refuses to keep them.
So what happens to the mares? Their ultimate fate gets a bit fuzzy too, right?
It does. Different versions again. One popular account says they were released onto Mount Olympus, maybe, or set aside to be sacrificed to Hera.
But Hera still hating Hercules.
And still holding that grudge, she refused to accept them. So these monstrous mares just wandered off into the region of Argos.
And met a suitably grim end.
Eventually killed by wild animals, some say. Or maybe even consumed by their own insatiable hunger when there were no more people to eat. A fittingly gruesome finish.
But there's another version. Something about their descendants.
Yeah, interestingly, another tradition suggests their line didn't die out. That their descendants survived, maybe became slightly less monstrous over time.
And this connects to Alexander the Great.
Supposedly, his famous horse, Bucephalus, was said to be descended from these very mares.
Wow, that's a wild thought. From man-eaters to a legendary warhorse. Quite the lineage, if true.
It's a tantalizing idea, isn't it? Whether true or not, it shows how the story continued to ripple outwards.
And what's really fascinating is how Hercules himself, his whole myth, kept evolving way beyond just this one brutal labor, especially after the Roman Empire became Christianized.
Right. His stories didn't just disappear, they were reinterpreted, often as allegory.
So Hercules overcoming monsters becomes what? Overcoming earthly desires? Sin.
Exactly, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
He was even identified with Samson from the Bible in some early texts, the strongman connection.
It shows how adaptable his core story was, transcending cultural and religious boundaries.
Definitely. And in medieval mythography, he wasn't just strong. He was seen as a role model for valor, yes, but also wisdom. The monsters became symbols of moral obstacles, vices to overcome.
Then the Renaissance hits, the printing press gets going.
And there's this huge renewed interest in the original Greek literature. Mythographers like Natala Conti started emphasizing Hercules' wisdom and his great soul, even more than just his muscles.
So less brute strength, more intellectual and moral virtue.
That became a major interpretation. You even had rulers like Henry IV of France being nicknamed the Hercule Gaulois, the Gallic Hercules.
His influence on Rome itself was just immense, wasn't it? Even geographically.
Yeah, the road of Hercules across southern Gaul.
And Hannibal?
Hannibal crossing the Alps. Famously invoked parallels between himself and Hercules during his epic march to Italy. Visited a shrine to Hercules at Gade's modern Cadiz, and even performed his own labors, like, smashing through a cliff, blocking his army's path.
Using Hercules as a template for his own ambition and struggle. Amazing.
And the actual worship of Hercules in Rome was extensive. There's some debate among ancient writers about women's roles in his cults.
Right. Macrobius and Aulus Gellius mention restrictions. Women couldn't swear oaths by Hercules or sacrifice in certain specific cults.
Correct. But there's still evidence of broader female veneration in other contexts. It's complex. But his role in military triumphs was huge. Statues dedicated to him going way back, like 305 BCE.
And multiple temples in Rome itself by the time of Augustus. He was a big deal.
Absolutely. And in art, he's instantly recognizable.
The lion skin, the big gnarled club, usually looking pretty tanned and rugged.
Reflecting his outdoor life, his labors. Modern artists still grapple with him, too. Jeff Koons, Matthew Derbyshire. Though their use of stark, white materials has sparked some debate about colorism in classical interpretation.
Perpetuating that image of classical figures as exclusively white.
Exactly. Whereas someone like Robert Mapplethorpe, his photography can be seen as pushing back against those neoclassical ideals, resisting that default whiteness. It's an ongoing conversation.
And his image pops up everywhere else too. Coins.
Ancient Roman coins, modern collector coins,
Yeah.
linking him to power, wealth.
Military hardware.
Ships named HMS Hercules, the Lockheed C-130 Hercules transport plane, famous for its strength and reliability.
Even military operations like Operation Hercules, the German plan for Malta in WWII.
It's a go-to name for strength and difficult tasks.
Plus geographical landmarks like the Pillars of Hercules at Gibraltar, rock formations called Hercules Cudgel, heraldry.
Symbolizing strength, courage on coats of arms, and then there's pop culture.
Oh, yeah. Absolutely massive, from those Italian sword and sandal Hercules movies in the 50s and 60s.
Steve Reeves.
Right. To countless American films, cartoons, comics, video games. He's just endlessly adaptable, endlessly fascinating, truly timeless.
He really is.
So that confrontation with the Mares of Diomedes, it really does stand out as one of the most brutal, unforgettable chapters in the whole Hercules saga.
It was a harrowing test, wasn't it? A test of courage, sure, but also this shocking display of, well, justice, maybe? A testament to his willingness to use extreme means to end extreme terror.
This deep dive into the Mares of Diomedes is, I think, a chilling reminder of the dangers of unchecked power, of insatiable appetite, whether you find it in beasts or in men.
It really remains a powerful symbol, doesn't it? The consequences of letting monstrous appetites just run wild.
So what does this story really reveal about the nature of heroism? About that idea that maybe sometimes to defeat pure, insatiable savagery.
A hero has to descend into that darkness themselves, blur the lines between justice and barbarity.
Yeah. It really leaves you wondering, doesn't it? At what cost does that kind of victory truly come?